The bullet meant for Chief Carrick found his shoulder instead, spinning him off the rooftop and into the street below. Hospital corpsman second class Alara Voss heard the wet crack of impact before she heard the shot, which meant the enemy sniper was far. 800 meters at least, maybe more. She was already moving toward Carrick when the second round sparked off the stone wall inches from her face, and she understood with terrible clarity that they were all going to die in this Afghan village unless someone killed that sniper first. But that moment was still coming. 72 hours earlier, Voss stood in the medical bay at Forward Operating Base Wolverine, checking her supplies for the third time while pretending not to hear the conversation happening 10 feet behind her. Chief Petty Officer Brock Hadley was not a man who whispered. She could feel his eyes on her back as he spoke to the others. "Another female corpsman," he said. "Command keeps sending us people who have never seen real combat and expecting us to babysit them through firefights." Nobody responded. The silence was its own kind of agreement. Voss finished her inventory and sealed her medical bag. She had heard variations of this speech at every unit she had ever been assigned to. The words changed, but the meaning stayed the same. "You do not belong here. You will get someone killed. Prove us wrong if you can." She always did. They never remembered. That night, she found Petty Officer First Class Rook Elliston sitting alone behind the equipment shed, his breathing too fast and his hands shaking against his knees. He was 23 years old, on his second deployment, and he was falling apart where no one could see him. Voss sat down next to him without asking permission. She did not say anything for a long time, just breathed slow and steady, letting him hear the rhythm, letting his body remember how lungs were supposed to work. Finally he spoke. "I keep seeing the kid from last month, the one who stepped on the IED. I keep seeing his face right before it happened. He knew. He looked right at me, and he knew." Voss nodded. "That happens," she said. "The ones who know, they stay with you." Rook wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, embarrassed and grateful and exhausted all at once. "How do you deal with it?" he asked. "I save the next one," she said. "Every time I lose someone, I save the next one. That is the only answer I have found." They sat together until his breathing steadied and the shaking stopped. When he finally stood to leave, Voss caught his arm. "This conversation never happened," she said. "You were never here, and neither was I. Understood?" He nodded. "Why?" he asked. "Because you do not need anyone knowing you had a hard night. You need them seeing you stand up tomorrow and do your job. That is what matters." Rook walked away without looking back, but she saw his shoulders straighten as he went. The next morning, Master Chief Wendell Carrick found her cleaning her equipment in the early light. He was the platoon sniper, a quiet man with gray at his temples and eyes that missed nothing. He watched her work for a moment before speaking. "That is an expensive scope you have there," he said. "Night Force. Competition grade. Strange thing for a corpsman to carry." Voss did not look up. "It was a gift," she said. Carrick waited. She did not elaborate. "Most medics I know carry extra bandages in that pocket," he continued. "Not precision optics worth $2,000. Voss finally met his eyes. She saw no judgment there, only curiosity and something that might have been recognition. "Some gifts are worth carrying," she said, "even when they are heavy." Carrick studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, as if she had answered a question he had not quite asked. "Some secrets are worth keeping," he said, "until they are not." He walked away, leaving Voss alone with the scope in her hands and the memory of the brother who had given it to her, whose name was engraved on the inside of the case, whose grave she had visited the week before deploying to this place where he had died 3 years ago. She packed the scope carefully in her medical bag, next to the bandages and tourniquets and morphine. She had never told anyone why she carried it. She had never told anyone about Marcus, about the championships they had won together, about the way he had made her promise to keep shooting after he shipped out. She had broken that promise when he died. She had not touched a rifle since, but she still carried the scope, and sometimes, late at night, she still looked through it at the stars and remembered what it felt like to be certain of anything. The mission briefing came that afternoon. Lieutenant Commander Dax Oconee stood before a map of Nangarhar province and explained that they were going after a high-value target hiding in a village called Kaskar. Taliban commander. responsible for 3 ambushes on American convoys in the past 2 months. Hadley sat in the front row, arms crossed, already calculating how to minimize the corpsman's involvement. When Oconee assigned positions, Hadley spoke up. The corpsman should stay at the rear of the formation. Less chance of her slowing us down if contact happens. Oconee looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Voss. Corpsman Voss stays with the main element, he said. If we take casualties, I want medical support immediate, not 300 meters behind us. Hadley's jaw tightened, but he said nothing else. After the briefing, Kara caught her eye across the room. He glanced at Hadley, then back at her, and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Stay close to me during the op, he said quietly as he passed. Things go wrong. You'll want to be where you can do the most good. She understood what he was not saying. He had seen something in her. He was giving her a chance to prove it. She just was not sure she wanted to. The helicopter was scheduled to lift off at 2,300 hours. Voss spent the hours before departure doing what she always did. Checking her gear, rechecking her gear, running through scenarios in her head until the variables stopped making her nervous and started making her prepared. She was in the equipment room when Rook found her. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her work before stepping inside. I wanted to say thank you, he said. For last night, I have not slept that well in weeks. Voss kept her hands moving, organizing tourniquets by size. I told you that conversation never happened. It did not, Rook agreed. I am thanking you for something else entirely. For being the kind of person who sits with someone in the dark and does not ask questions. She looked up at him then. He was young, but his eyes were older than they should have been. Where did that? It aged you in places that did not show on the outside. You. The helicopter was scheduled to lift off at 2,300 hours. Voss spent the hours before departure doing what she always did. Checking her gear, rechecking her gear, running through scenarios in her head until the variables stopped making her nervous and started making her prepared. She was in the equipment room when Rook found her. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her work before stepping inside. I wanted to say thank you, he said. For last night, I have not slept that well in weeks. Voss kept her hands moving, organizing tourniquets by size. I told you that conversation never happened. It did not, Rook agreed. I am thanking you for something else entirely. For being the kind of person who sits with someone in the dark and does not ask questions. She looked up at him then. He was young, but his eyes were older than they should have been. Where did that? It aged you in places that did not show on the outside. You ready for tonight? She asked. Rook nodded. Ready as I will ever be. Hadley has been running extra drills all day. I think he's trying to prove something. He is always trying to prove something, Voss said. Just focus on your job and let him focus on his. Rook hesitated at the door. He thinks you're going to get someone killed, he said. He told us as much during the drills. Said female attachments are a liability in combat. Voss did not stop working. What do you think? She asked. I think you're the calmest person on this base, Rook said. And I think calm is what keeps people alive when everything goes wrong. He left before she could respond. She sat alone with his words and the weight of the scope in her bag and the photograph she had not looked at in 3 days. She pulled it out now. Marcus in his marine dress blues, grinning at the camera like he knew a secret the world had not figured out yet. He had been 26 when the picture was taken, 27 when he died in a valley not far from where she was about to fly tonight. I'm going back, she told the photograph, to the place you never came home from. I do not know if that is brave or stupid or just something I have to do. Marcus did not answer. He never did. But she liked to think he heard her anyway. Before we go any further with this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop a comment and let us know your state or your country. Maybe you know someone who served in places like this. Maybe you have a photograph of your own that you carry, someone who shipped out and changed everything when they did. Those connections matter. They're the reason stories like this one deserve to be told. The helicopter pad was chaos organized into precision. 12 SEALs checking weapons and gear, voices low, movements efficient. Voss took her position near the rear of the group and watched them work. Lieutenant Commander Oconee gathered them for final instructions. His voice was calm and certain, the voice of a man who had done this more times than he could count. Intelligence suggests the target is in the village center, he said. We insert 2 clicks east and approach on foot. Carrick provides overwatch from the high ground. The rest of us move in teams of 4. Corpsman Voss stays with Alpha Team. Hadley stepped forward. Sir, I still think the Corpsman would be more effective at the rear. If we take contact, she will be in the way. Oconee expression did not change. Your objection is noted, Chief. My orders stand. The tension between them was a living thing. Voss felt the other SEALs watching, measuring, deciding whose side they were on. Most of them had not made up their minds about her yet. Tonight would change that, one way or another. Carrick appeared at her shoulder as they moved toward the helicopter. He did not look at her when he spoke. Stay sharp tonight, he said. Something about this op feels wrong. Wrong how, she asked. He shook his head. Cannot explain it. Just a feeling. 20 years of doing this. You learn to trust the feelings. The helicopter lifted off into the Afghan night, rotors beating against the darkness. Voss sat with her back against the cold metal hull and watched the mountains pass beneath them. Somewhere down there, in a village most maps did not show, a Taliban commander was waiting. And somewhere down there, in a valley she had studied on satellite images until she could see it when she closed her eyes, her brother had taken his last breath. She touched the scope through the fabric of her bag. Still there, still heavy, still waiting for her to become the person Marcus had always believed she could be. The crew chief held up 2 fingers. 2 minutes to insertion. Voss checked her medical kit one final time. Tourniquets, pressure bandages, chest seals, morphine, surgical tools. Everything she needed to keep men alive when the world was trying to kill them. Hadley moved through the cabin, checking each SEAL in turn. When he reached Voss, he stopped. Stay out of the way tonight, he said. Do your job and nothing else. She met his eyes without flinching. My job is keeping your men alive, Chief. I intend to do exactly that. Something flickered across his face. Not respect, not yet, but something close to acknowledgement. He moved on without another word. The helicopter flared and touched down in a field of dry grass. The SEALs poured out into the night, weapons up, moving with practiced silence toward the tree line. Voss followed, staying close to Carrick like he had told her. The village was 3 kilometers ahead. 3 kilometers of mountain terrain and darkness, with an enemy who knew these hills better than any map could show. They had been moving for 20 minutes when Carrick held up a fist. Everyone froze. Voss scanned the darkness, trying to see what he saw. Then she caught it. A flicker of light on the ridge above the village. There for a moment, then gone. Signal fire, Carrick whispered. He keyed his radio. Wolverine 6, this is Overwatch. We have activity on the eastern ridge. Possible early warning system. Oconee's voice came back quiet and tense. Acknowledged Overwatch. Can you confirm hostile presence? Negative, but someone knows we are coming. The team held position while Oconee made the call. Voss felt her heart pounding against her ribs. Every second they waited was a second for the enemy to prepare. Finally, Oconee spoke. We continue mission. Stay alert for ambush positions. Carrick, get to your Overwatch point and report anything you see. Copy that, Carrick said. He looked at Voss one more time. Remember what I told you. Stay where you can do the most good. Then he disappeared into the darkness, climbing toward the high ground that would give him eyes on the entire valley. Voss watched him go and felt the weight of everything that was about to happen settling onto her shoulders. The village waited ahead, silent and dark except for that single fire still burning in its center. They know we are coming, Hadley said to no one in particular, and they are ready for us. The team moved forward anyway. There was no other choice. The village of Kostgar grew larger with every step. Stone buildings clustered together like frightened animals, narrow streets winding between them in patterns that made no sense to Western eyes. The mountains rose behind it, black shapes against a blacker sky. Voss moved with Alpha Team, her boots finding the quiet places between rocks and dry brush. She had learned to walk like this in Montana, hunting elk with her grandfather before dawn. The skills translated better than anyone would have guessed. Hadley set a punishing pace. She knew he was testing her, waiting for her to fall behind, to prove his point about female attachments. She matched him step for step and said nothing. They were 500 meters from the village when she saw it. A disturbance in the path ahead, barely visible in the starlight. The dirt was too smooth, too recently turned. She had seen that pattern before, in training photographs and field reports, and the nightmares of men who had stepped in the wrong place. She grabbed the arm of the seal in front of her and pulled him back. He spun, ready to shake her off, but she pointed at the ground and mouthed one word. IED. The team froze. Hadley moved forward, his eyes following her gesture to the disturbed earth. He studied it for a long moment, then pulled out a marker and flagged the spot for the explosive ordnance team that would come after them. He looked at Voss. His expression was unreadable in the darkness. "Good eye," he said. Nothing more. But he did not question her pace again for the rest of the approach. Brock Hadley had not always hated the idea of women in combat. There had been a time when he judged people by what they could do, not by who they were. That time ended in a compound in Helmand Province 4 years ago. Her name was Lieutenant Sarah Chun, intelligence officer. She was supposed to stay in the rear during the raid, but the plan fell apart the moment they breached the door. Hadley's best friend, a SEAL named Danny Kowalski, took a round in the leg and went down hard in the courtyard. Chun was closest. All she had to do was drag him to cover. 10 feet, maybe less. She froze, stood there in the open with bullets snapping past her head, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do the one thing that would have saved Danny's life. Hadley watched his best friend bleed out while a woman stood 5 feet away and did nothing. He carried Danny's body to the helicopter himself. He carried the weight of that moment every day since. And he swore he would never trust a woman in combat again, because the cost of being wrong was more than he could bear. Now, he watched Corpsman Voss moving through the darkness ahead of him, and he felt the old anger mixing with something he did not want to name. She had spotted the IED. She had potentially saved 3 lives with that single observation. But one good call did not erase what he knew to be true. When the shooting started, when the chaos came, people revealed who they really were. And he had seen too many people reveal themselves as cowards to believe that this one would be any different. The village perimeter was quiet. Too quiet. No dogs barking. No livestock shuffling in their pens. No sounds of human habitation at all. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished, or been warned to hide. Oconee voice came through the radio, barely a whisper. All teams report position. Alpha in position, southeast approach. Bravo in position, northwest approach. Overwatch in position. Carrick's voice was calm and steady. I have eyes on the village center. No movement. Wait. I have something on the eastern ridge. Muzzle flash. The first shot cracked across the valley before he finished speaking. Voss saw Carrick silhouetted against the sky for just a moment, a dark shape on the rooftop 200 meters to her left. Then the bullet found him, and he spun backward, tumbling off the roof and into the street below with a sound she would never forget. Contact, someone shouted. Sniper on the ridge. The village erupted. Muzzle flashes from windows and doorways. The staccato bark of AK-47s mixing with the deeper boom of the SEALs returning fire. Voss dropped to one knee behind a low wall and tried to locate Carrick in the chaos. There, he was lying in the street, not moving, exposed to fire from at least 3 directions. She did not think. She moved. Corpsman, stay down, Hadley yelled, but she was already running, keeping low, using the shadows and the chaos as cover. Bullets kicked up dust around her feet. She did not slow down. She reached Carrick and dropped beside him. His shoulder was a mess of blood and torn fabric, but he was breathing. His eyes found hers, filled with pain and something that might have been surprise. Thought I told you to stay where you could do the most good, he managed. This is where I can do the most good, she said. She was already working, applying pressure, reaching for the tourniquet she did not need because the bullet had missed the artery. Small blessings in the middle of hell. The sniper, Carrick said. High ground. Eastern Ridge. 800 meters, maybe more. He is good. Really good. A bullet sparked off the wall above their heads. Voss covered Carrick with her body instinctively, shielding his wound from the debris. We need to move, she said. Can you walk? Carrick tried to push himself up and gasped. His face went white. Give me a minute, he said through clenched teeth. They did not have a minute. The enemy fire was intensifying, and she could hear Oconee shouting orders, trying to coordinate a response to an ambush they had walked straight into. Another shot from the ridge. Another SEAL went down, clutching his thigh. Voss looked at Carrick, looked at the wounded man 30 meters away, looked at the chaos unfolding around her. Then she looked at the street where Carrick had fallen, and she saw his sniper rifle lying in the dust, abandoned where it had landed when he took the hit. 800 meters. The enemy sniper was 800 meters away, picking them off one by one, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Nothing except someone with the skills to shoot back. Carrick followed her gaze. He saw the rifle. He saw the look in her eyes. Voss, he said, whatever you are thinking, do not do it. But she was already calculating the distance, the wind, the angle. Already remembering what her hands knew how to do, what her brother had spent years teaching her, what she had sworn she would never do again. The sniper fired again. This time the bullet passed close enough for her to hear it whisper past her ear. She was out of time. They all were. The ambush was a living thing, growing larger and hungrier with every passing second. Voss worked on Carrick's shoulder while the world exploded around them, her hands steady even as her mind raced through the mathematics of survival. Entry wound clean, exit wound messy but manageable. No arterial involvement. He would live if she could stop the bleeding and get him a cover. She packed the wound and wrapped it tight, ignoring the bullets that sparked off the stones above her head. Carrick watched her work with eyes that were too focused, too alert for a man who had just taken a rifle round. You have done this before, he said. Not a question. I'm a corpsman, she said. This is what I do. That is not what I mean. Before she could respond, a scream cut through the chaos. She knew that voice. Rook. She turned and saw him 20 meters away, dragging himself toward cover with one leg trailing uselessly behind him. Blood painted the dust in a dark smear, marking his path. Stay here, she told Carrick. Keep pressure on the wound. She was moving before he could argue, running low and fast through the kill zone. A bullet tugged at her sleeve, close enough to feel the heat of its passage. She did not slow down. Rook's face was pale and slick with sweat when she reached him. The round had taken him the thigh, and she could see immediately that this one was bad. The blood was coming too fast, pulsing with his heartbeat. Arterial, she said, more to herself than to him. She grabbed his belt and yanked it free, wrapping it around his upper thigh and pulling it tight. Rook screamed through clenched teeth. I know, she said. I know it hurts. Stay with me. She worked fast, her hands moving through procedures she had practiced 1,000 times. Tourniquet secured. Bleeding slowed. She reached for the morphine in her kit and stopped. If she gave him morphine now, he would fade, and she needed him conscious enough to apply pressure while she dealt with whatever came next. Rook, she said, look at me. His eyes found hers, swimming with pain, but still present. You're going to keep your hand right here, she said, pressing his palm against the wound. You're going to push hard, and you're not going to stop. Can you do that? He nodded weakly. Say it, she demanded. I can do it, he whispered. Good. I will be back. She left him there and ran back to Carrick, her mind cataloging the chaos around her. At least 3 SEALs down now, the rest pinned behind whatever cover they could find. Oconee was shouting into his radio, calling for air support that was 20 minutes away at best. And through it all, the enemy sniper kept firing. Methodical, patient, picking them apart one shot at a time. Another crack from the ridge. Another SEAL jerked and fell, clutching his arm. Voss dropped beside Carrick. His face was gray, but his eyes were sharp. That sniper is killing us, he said. We cannot move, cannot coordinate, cannot do anything while he has that angle on us. Can anyone get a shot on him? She asked. Carrick shook his head. He is too far, too well positioned. I might have been able to take him, but now... He looked at his ruined shoulder. Then he looked at Voss. Then he looked at his rifle, still lying in the dust 15 feet away. I saw the scope in your bag, he said quietly. Night Force. Competition grade. Nobody carries something like that unless they know how to use it. Voss felt her heart hammering against her ribs. That was a long time ago. How long? 3 years. She swallowed hard. Since my brother died. Carrick studied her face. Your brother was a shooter. He was a Marine sniper. He taught me everything he knew. We used to compete together. She paused. I was better than him, actually. He never admitted it, but we both knew. Another shot from the ridge. Another cry of pain. Carrick grabbed her arm with his good hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. Voss, listen to me. I have been doing this for 20 years. I know what a shooter looks like. I saw it in you the first day you arrived. The way you move. The way you calculate distances without thinking about it. The way your eyes track movement. I'm a medic, she said. You are whatever you need to be, Carrick said. Right now, this team needs a sniper. Not in 20 minutes when the helicopters arrive. Right now, a bullet struck the wall behind them, showering them with stone fragments. Voss covered her face instinctively. When she lowered her hands, Carrick was still staring at her. That rifle is 15 feet away, he said. The sniper will try to kill you the moment you go for it. But if you can reach it, if you can get to cover and get a shot, you might be the only person who can save us. I have not fired a rifle in 3 years, she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Small and frightened, and nothing like the woman she had trained herself to become. Some things you do not forget, Carrick said. Your brother taught you. He is still teaching you. Every time you look through that scope you carry. You just have not been listening. Voss looked at the rifle. Looked at Rook, still pressing his hand against his leg, his face twisted with pain. Looked at the other wounded men scattered across the kill zone. She thought about Marcus. About the promise she had made at his grave to keep shooting. About the promise she had broken when she buried him and swore she would never touch a rifle again. She thought about the scope in her bag, heavy with memory and grief, and all the things she had tried to leave behind. The sniper fired again. The bullet struck 2 feet from where Hadley was crouched, driving him deeper into cover. Voss, Carrick said, whatever happened to your brother, whatever promise you made, he would not want you to die keeping it. He would want you to fight. She closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw Marcus smiling at her across the firing line, adjusting her grip, telling her to breathe through the shot. You were always better than me, he used to say. You just never believed it. She opened her eyes. Keep pressure on your wound, she told Carrick, and stay down. Then she was running, sprinting toward the rifle, toward the sniper's kill zone, toward everything she had spent 3 years trying to escape. The first shot missed her by inches. The second kicked up dust at her feet. She dove, rolled, and came up with the rifle in her hands. The weight of it was familiar, terrifying, perfect. She pressed herself against the low wall and tried to remember how to breathe. The rifle felt foreign in her hands. 3 years of deliberately forgetting, and now her muscles were trying to remember what her mind had worked so hard to bury. Voss pressed her back against the stone wall and fought the trembling in her fingers. Around her, the battle raged on. Bullets cracked overhead. Men shouted and bled and died. And she sat frozen with a weapon she had sworn never to touch again. She could not do this. She was a medic. She saved lives with bandages and tourniquets and steady hands. She did not take lives. Not anymore. Not since Marcus. The memory came unbidden, as it always did when she let her guard down. A shooting range in Montana, summer sun blazing overhead. Marcus home on leave, laughing as he watched her group 5 shots into a space the size of a quarter at 300 yards. You are a freak of nature, he said. You know that, right? She was 17. He was 24. He had just finished sniper school, top of his class, and she was out shooting him with a rifle she had never fired before. It is just math, she told him. Wind speed, bullet drop, distance. Calculate the variables, and the shot makes itself. Marcus shook his head. It is not just math, Alara. It is instinct. You have something most people spend years trying to develop. A gift. She remembered the pride in his voice. The way he looked at her, like she was something special, something rare. He had always believed in her more than she believed in herself. 6 months later, he shipped out to Afghanistan. 8 months after that, he came home in a box. The scope she carried in her medical bag was the last thing he ever gave her. He had mailed it from Bugram 2 weeks before he died, with a note that said only 3 words. "Keep shooting, Elara." She had not. She had buried the scope in a drawer and enlisted in the Navy and become a corpsman because saving lives felt like penance for the one she could not save. She had carried a scope with her to every deployment, a talisman and a reminder and a weight she could not put down. But she had never looked through it, not once in 3 years. Another shot from the ridge snapped her back to the present. She heard someone scream, heard Oconee cursing into his radio, heard Hadley shouting for suppressive fire that no one could provide. They were dying. One by one, they were all dying, and she was sitting here paralyzed by a ghost. Voss looked at the rifle in her hands. Carrick's rifle, a 13 Malawian Quatches Mod 7, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. Effective range, well over 1,000 meters in the right hands. Her hands used to be the right hands. She thought about Rook, bleeding out 20 meters away with his palm pressed against his leg. She thought about Carrick, gray-faced and watching her with eyes that held no judgment. She thought about Hadley, who hated everything she represented but was fighting anyway because that was what warriors did. She thought about Marcus. "What would you do," she whispered, "if you were here? If you could see me now?" The answer came in his voice. Clear as the day, he taught her to shoot. "I would tell you to stop being afraid of who you are. I would tell you that the gift does not go away just because you ignore it. I would tell you that those men are going to die unless someone saves them, and you are the only someone who can." Voss reached into her medical bag. Her fingers found the scope, cool and heavy and familiar. She pulled it out and looked at it for the first time in 3 years. Marcus Voss, engraved on the inside of the case. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. She had not been faithful. She had run from his memory, from his gift, from everything he tried to give her. She had hidden behind a medic's bag and told herself she was honoring him by saving lives when really she was just too scared to be the shooter he knew she could be. No more. She detached the standard scope from Carrick's rifle and mounted her brother's optic with hands that had stopped shaking. The movements came back to her like breathing, like her body had been waiting for permission to remember. When she raised the rifle and looked through the glass, the world transformed. Everything sharpened. The chaos faded to background noise. The fear went quiet. There was only the scope and the target and the math her brain had never stopped calculating. She scanned the eastern ridge, searching for the enemy's sniper. 800 meters. Maybe more. The wind was coming from the northwest at maybe 8 miles per hour. Temperature differential between the valley floor and the ridge would affect the shot. Bullet drop at that distance would be significant. Variables. Just variables. Calculate them correctly, and the shot makes itself. There. Movement on the ridge. A shadow shifting behind a rock formation. The enemy sniper repositioning for his next kill. She tracked him, waiting for a clear shot. Her breathing slowed automatically, falling into the rhythm Marcus had drilled into her 1,000 times. Inhale. Exhale halfway. Hold. Squeeze. The sniper moved again, and for just a moment, she saw him clearly. Dark clothing. Rifle barrel glinting in the starlight. Face obscured, but position exposed. She had the shot. 840 meters, wind from the right, elevation adjusted. Her finger found the trigger, and then the sniper fired first. The bullet struck the wall 6 inches from her head, spraying her face with stone fragments. She flinched, lost the sight picture, and ducked back behind cover as her heart hammered against her ribs. He had seen her. He knew where she was. And now they were hunting each other. Voss wiped the dust from her eyes and raised the rifle again. Somewhere on that ridge, a man was trying to kill her. And somewhere in her memory, her brother was telling her she was better than this. She had one chance to prove him right. The sniper duel had begun, and Voss understood with cold clarity that only one of them would survive it. She pressed herself against the wall and forced her breathing to slow. Panic was the enemy now, more dangerous than the man on the ridge. Panic made you rush. Panic made you miss. Panic got you killed. She was not going to panic. The enemy sniper was good. Very good. He had positioned himself in a natural depression in the rocks, minimizing his profile while maximizing his field of fire. He had night vision, probably Russian-made, and he had been picking off seals with mechanical precision for the past 10 minutes. But he had made one mistake. He had revealed his position when he shot at her. Voss replayed the muzzle flash in her mind, triangulating the exact location. 40 meters left of where she had first spotted movement. He had relocated after his last kill, standard counter-sniper protocol. But now she knew his pattern. She raised the rifle slowly, keeping the barrel below the top of the wall. If he saw movement, he would fire. She needed to acquire the target before he acquired her. Through her brother's scope, the ridge came into sharp focus. She scanned the rock formation where she had seen the flash, searching for any sign of the shooter. Nothing. He was disciplined, patient, waiting for her to expose herself. Two could play that game. Across the kill zone, Hadley was watching her. She could feel his eyes, even without looking, could sense his confusion and disbelief. The corpsman he had dismissed as a liability was now crouched behind a wall with a sniper rifle, hunting the enemy that had pinned down his entire team. He did not understand. He could not understand. Not yet. A minute passed. Then two. The battle continued around them, sporadic gunfire from both sides, but the sniper had gone quiet. Waiting. Hunting. Voss watched the ridge and let her mind work the problem. The enemy sniper had two options: stay hidden and wait for her to move, or reposition to get a better angle. If he stayed hidden, this became a waiting game she could not win. Her team was bleeding out while they played chess on a mountainside. She needed to force his hand. She picked up a stone from the ground beside her and calculated the angle. Then she threw it hard and fast toward a position 10 meters to her right. The stone clattered against the rocks. The sniper fired instantly, his bullet striking exactly where the sound had originated. And in the muzzle flash, Voss saw him. 840 meters. Wind from the northwest, stronger now, maybe 10 miles per hour. Temperature dropping as the night deepened. She made the adjustments automatically, her hands moving the scope's turrets with practiced precision. The sniper was already relocating, moving to a new position before she could return fire. She tracked him through the scope, watching his shadow flow across the rocks like water. He stopped, settled into a new hide, raised his rifle. For one frozen moment, they were both looking at each other through their scopes. Hunter and hunter, predator and predator. Voss exhaled halfway and held her breath. The math was simple. Distance, wind, elevation, bullet drop. Variables she had calculated 1,000 times on ranges across 3 states. Variables her brother had drilled into her until they became instinct. But this was not a paper target. This was a man. A man who would die if she squeezed the trigger. A man who would kill everyone she cared about if she did not. She thought about Rook bleeding in the dust. She thought about Carrick, watching her with faith she had not earned. She thought about Marcus, who had believed in her even when she could not believe in herself. You were always better than me, Alara. You just never believed it. She believed it now. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Smooth pressure, straight back, just like Marcus taught her. No yerking, no flinching. Just the slow, steady squeeze that separated amateurs from professionals. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The report echoed across the valley. 840 meters away, the enemy sniper's head snapped back. His rifle fell from his hands. His body slumped forward and did not move again. Silence. The gunfire around her sputtered and stopped as both sides processed what had just happened. The unstoppable sniper who had been systematically killing Americans was dead, killed by a single shot from an impossible distance. Voss lowered the rifle and realized she was shaking. Not from fear, from something else entirely. Something that felt like grief and triumph and release all tangled together in her chest. She had done it. After 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending to be someone she was not, she had finally become the person Marcus always knew she could be. Hadley appeared beside her. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something she had never seen from him before. What the hell was that? He breathed. Voss met his gaze. That was me doing my job. Your job is being a corpseman. My job is keeping your men alive. She gestured toward the ridge where the sniper's body lay cooling in the darkness. That man was killing them. Now he is not. Job done. Hadley stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Because he was. The woman he had dismissed, the liability he had resented, had just made a shot that most trained snipers would have missed. Where did you learn to shoot like that? He asked. My brother taught me. She stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. He was a Marine sniper. Best I ever knew. He died 3 years ago in a valley not far from here. Understanding dawned in Hadley's eyes. The scope. That is why you carry it. It was his. Last thing he ever gave me. She looked toward the ridge one more time. I promised him I would keep shooting. Tonight, I finally kept that promise. The radio crackled. Oconee voice, urgent but controlled. All teams, the sniper is down. We need to move to the extraction point. Medevac is 15 minutes out. Everyone who can move, start moving. Everyone who cannot, we carry. Voss handed the rifle back toward Hadley. Take this. I have wounded to treat. She did not wait for his response. She was already running toward Rook, toward Carrick, toward the men who needed a medic more than they needed a sniper. Behind her, Hadley stood holding the rifle and watching her go. The corpseman he had hated. The shooter he had never expected. The woman who had just saved them all. He did not understand her yet, but he was starting to. Voss reached Rook first. He was still conscious, still pressing his hand against his thigh, but his skin had gone gray and his breathing was shallow. The tourniquet had slowed the bleeding, but he had already lost too much. Hey, she said, dropping beside him. Still with me? Rook's eyes found hers. They were glassy, but present. Heard the shot, he whispered. Was it you? Focus on breathing. She was already working, checking the tourniquet, assessing the wound, calculating how much time they had before shock took him completely. Can you feel your foot? He tried to wiggle his toes and winced. Yeah, hurts like hell. Good. Pain means blood flow. Pain means you are still alive. She reached for her medical kit and pulled out a bag of saline and a 4-needle. Rook watched her hands move with detached fascination, like he was observing something happening to someone else. You killed him, he said. The sniper. I heard the guys talking. 800 meters. 840, she corrected, sliding the needle into his arm with practiced ease. I did not kill him. I stopped him. There is a difference. Is there? Voss taped the 4 in place and hung the saline bag from a broken piece of rebar jutting from the wall. She looked at Rook's face, so young despite everything he had seen, and she thought about Marcus at the same age. Cocky and confident and absolutely certain that he was invincible. Marcus had learned otherwise. So had she. My brother was a sniper, she said. The words came easier now, like saying them once had broken something loose inside her. Marinko. He was the one who taught me to shoot. We used to compete together back before he enlisted. I was 17, the first time I beat him at distance. Rook managed a weak smile. But he loved that. He did, actually. Said I had a gift. Said I was wasted on anything but a rifle. She adjusted the 4-drip and checked his pulse. He shipped out to Afghanistan 6 years ago. Came home in a box 8 months later. The smile faded from Rook's face. I am sorry. Me too. She pulled a thermal blanket from her kit and spread it over him. He sent me his scope before he died. Told me to keep shooting. I did not. Not until tonight. Why not? Because shooting reminded me of him, and remembering him hurt too much. Rook was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out with his free hand and touched her arm. He will be proud of you, he said, for what you did tonight. Voss felt something crack in her chest, something she had been holding together with sheer will for 3 years. She blinked hard and focused on her work. We need to move you, she said. Extraction point is 300 meters west. Can you put any weight on that leg? I can try. Trying is not good enough. She looked around for help and saw Hadley approaching, Carrick's rifle still in his hands. Chief, I need a carry team for Petty Officer Elliston. He cannot walk. Hadley nodded without hesitation. Brennan, Cortez, get over here. We are moving the wounded. 2 SEALs materialized out of the darkness and lifted Rook between them. He groaned but did not cry out, biting down on his lip until it bled. Voss moved to Carrick next. He was sitting up now, his back against the wall, his wounded arm cradled against his chest. His face was still pale, but his eyes were clear. "Hell of a shot," he said as she knelt beside him. "I had a good teacher." "Your brother?" She nodded. "And you? What you said about him wanted me to fight. That is what got me moving." Carrick smiled, a thin expression that did not quite reach his eyes. "I've just told you what you already knew. You did the rest." She checked his bandage and found it holding. The bleeding had stopped. He would need surgery when they got back to base, but he would live. "Can you walk?" she asked. "I can do better than walk." He held out his good hand. "Help me up. I'm not being carried out of here like cargo." She pulled him to his feet and steadied him as he swayed. For a moment they stood face to face, the sniper and the corpsman who had become a sniper, bound together by blood and bullets, and a shared understanding of what it meant to take a life to save others. "Thank you," Carrick said quietly, "for what you did. Thank me when we are on the helicopter." The team assembled in a loose formation, the walking wounded supporting each other, the critical cases carried on improvised stretchers. Oconee moved among them, checking weapons, counting heads, preparing for the push to extraction. Voss took her position near Rook's stretcher, her medical kit in one hand and her eyes scanning the darkness. The enemy sniper was dead, but that did not mean they were safe. There were still fighters in the village, still guns pointed in their direction, still 300 meters of open ground between them and the helicopter. Hadley appeared at her shoulder. He had given Carrick's rifle to another SEAL and drawn his sidearm instead. "I will stay with you," he said. "Keep you covered while you work." She looked at him, searching for the contempt she had grown accustomed to seeing in his eyes. It was not there. Something else had taken its place. Something that looked almost like respect. "Why?" she asked. "Because I was wrong about you." His jaw tightened. "I have been wrong about a lot of things, but I'm not too proud to admit it." There was more he wanted to say. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his eyes would not quite meet hers. But now was not the time. "Later," she said. "When we are out of here, you can tell me whatever you need to tell me." Hadley nodded. "Later," he agreed. Oconee's voice cut through the darkness. "All teams, we move in 30 seconds. Stay tight, stay quiet, and do not stop for anything until we reach the LZ. Medevac is inbound, 12 minutes out. 12 minutes. 300 meters of hostile territory. Wounded men who could not run and exhausted men who could barely walk." Voss checked her kit one more time and prepared to move. Behind them, the village had gone quiet. But on the eastern ridge, beyond the body of the sniper she had killed, shadows were moving against the sky. More fighters, coming fast. The night was not over yet. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, 12 men and 1 woman carrying their wounded toward salvation or death. The extraction point was a flat stretch of ground 300 meters west, barely large enough for a single helicopter, surrounded by rocks that would provide minimal cover if the enemy caught them in the open. Voss stayed close to Rook's stretcher, monitoring his breathing, watching for signs of shock. The 4 bags swung with each step the carriers took, a metronome counting down the seconds until the helicopter arrived. They had covered maybe 50 meters when the first shots came from behind. "Contact rear," someone shouted. The team scattered for cover, those who could move diving behind rocks and into ditches. The stretcher bearers dropped low, but kept moving, understanding that stopping meant dying. Voss turned and saw muzzle flashes on the ridge where the enemy sniper had died. His friends had found his body. They were coming for revenge. She grabbed the rifle from a SEAL nearest her, a young operator named Brennan who looked too shocked to protest. The weapon was an M4, not a precision rifle, but it would have to do. "Keep moving," she told the stretcher team. "Do not stop." Then she was running toward the rear of the formation, toward the gunfire, toward the enemy. Hadley appeared beside her without a word, his own rifle up and ready. They found cover behind a cluster of boulders and opened fire together. Voss aimed for the muzzle flashes, squeezing off controlled bursts that forced the enemy to duck and scatter. She was not trying to kill them. She was trying to buy time. 30 seconds of suppressive fire. Then they were moving again, leapfrogging backward toward the extraction point while the rest of the team pushed forward. The enemy followed. Of course they followed. Their sniper was dead and Americans were running, and nothing attracted predators like the scent of wounded prey. Voss and Hadley fell back in stages, one firing while the other moved, a dance they had never rehearsed but somehow knew by instinct. He covered her left flank. She covered his right. They moved as a single unit, two people who had hated each other 12 hours ago, now fighting as if they had trained together for years. A bullet caught the rock beside her head and sprayed her face with fragments. She felt blood running down her cheek, but did not stop to check the wound. "You hit," Hadley called. "Just a scratch. Keep moving." They reached the extraction point as the rest of the team was setting up a perimeter. Oconee had positioned his men in a rough semicircle, weapons pointed outward, ready to defend against attack from any direction. The clearing was exactly as bad as Voss had feared. Flat, exposed, with minimal cover and clear sight lines for anyone on the surrounding high ground. A perfect killing field. "Medevac is 8 minutes out," Oconee announced. "We hold here until it arrives." 8 minutes. An eternity in combat. Voss looked at the wounded men lying in the center of the perimeter and felt the weight of those 8 minutes pressing down on her shoulders. She returned Brennan's M4 and moved to check on Rook. He was unconscious now, his pulse weak but steady. The tourniquet was holding. If they could get him on that helicopter, he would live. If. Hadley appeared beside her carrying Carrick's sniper rifle. He held it out to her without ceremony. "You're going to need this," he said. She took the weapon and felt its familiar weight settle into her hands. Through the scope, she could see the enemy massing on the eastern ridge. 20 fighters at least, maybe more, gathering for a final assault. "How many rounds?" she asked. Hadley checked the magazine. 12. 12 rounds. 20 targets. And 8 minutes until salvation arrived. Voss settled into a prone position at the edge of the perimeter, the rifle tucked against her shoulder, her eye pressed to the scope. She had made impossible shots before. She would make them again. The enemy began to move, spreading out across the ridge in preparation for the attack. She tracked them through the scope, picking out the leaders, the ones carrying heavy weapons, the threats that would kill the most of her people if she let them get close enough. Hadley dropped down beside her. "What do you need?" he asked. "I need you to spot for me. Call the targets. Help me prioritize." He did not hesitate. He pulled out his binoculars and began scanning the ridge, his voice calm and professional as he fed her information. 2 fighters moving left, 100 meters from a main group. RPG gunner setting up behind the large boulder at your 11 o'clock. Squad leader in the center, red headband, directing movement. Voss adjusted her aim. The RPG gunner was the priority. If he got a shot off at the helicopter when it arrived, everyone died. She found him in her scope. 600 meters. Wind steady from the northwest. An easier shot than the sniper duel, but nothing was easy when lives hung in the balance. She exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The RPG gunner dropped. His weapon clattered uselessly against the rocks. 11 rounds remaining. The enemy scattered, seeking cover, trying to locate the shooter who had just killed their heavy weapons specialist. Voss used their confusion to find her next target. The squad leader, red headband, shouting orders, pointing toward the American position. She fired. He fell. 10 rounds. Hadley called targets, and she eliminated them, one by one, a methodical harvest that slowed the enemy advance but could not stop it entirely. For every fighter she killed, 2 more appeared on the ridge. They were outnumbered and outgunned and running out of time. 8 rounds. 7. 6. The helicopter appeared on the horizon, a dark shape against the stars, rotors beating the air into submission. Voss heard it before she saw it, felt the vibration in her chest like a second heartbeat. 5 minutes, Oconee called out. "Hold the line for 5 more minutes." Voss fired again. Another enemy fell. 5 rounds. The fighters were close enough now that she could see their faces through the scope. Young men, mostly, angry and desperate and determined to kill the Americans who had invaded their valley. She did not hate them. She understood them. But she would kill every last one of them if that was what it took to get her people home. 4 rounds. 3. The helicopter was close now, beginning its descent toward the clearing. The enemy saw it too. They surged forward, abandoning caution, racing to reach the Americans before the aircraft could evacuate them. 2 rounds, and then she saw him, a fighter breaking from the main group, sprinting toward a position that would give him a clear shot at the helicopter's tail rotor. He was carrying an RPG, the tube already loaded, his finger on the trigger. If he fired, the helicopter would spin out of control and crash into the clearing. Everyone would die. The wounded, the healthy, the pilots, everyone. Voss tracked him through her scope. 900 meters. Farther than any shot she had ever taken outside a competition. The wind was gusting now, unpredictable, swirling through the valley in patterns she could not fully calculate. 1 round left. Hadley saw what she saw. His voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "Can you make that shot?" he asked. Voss did not answer. She was already breathing, already calculating, already becoming the shooter her brother had always known she was. 1 shot, 1 chance, everything riding on the next 3 seconds. She thought of Marcus. She thought of Rook. She thought of everyone who would die if she missed. Then she stopped thinking entirely and let her hands do what they had been trained to do. 900 meters. Wind gusting from the northwest at 12 miles per hour, maybe 15. Temperature differential between the valley floor and the ridge creating thermal currents she could not see but had to account for. The RPG gunner was moving fast, almost his firing position, seconds away from destroying the helicopter and everyone aboard it. Voss made the calculations in the space between heartbeats. She adjusted for wind, for distance, for the slight upward angle of the shot. She accounted for variables that most shooters would not even consider, factors her brother had drilled into her during endless summer afternoons on the Montana ranges. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. The crosshairs settled on the running figure. Her finger found the trigger. In her mind, she heard Marcus speaking. Not the memory of his voice, but something deeper. Something that felt like his presence beside her, steadying her hands, calming her breathing, believing in her the way he always had. "You were always better than me, Ilera. You just never believed it." She believed it now. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The report echoed across the valley. The bullet traveled 917 meters in just over 1 second, cutting through the gusting wind, dropping exactly as much as she had calculated, striking the RPG gunner's center mass just as he raised his weapon to fire. He crumpled. The RPG tumbled from his hands and clattered against the rocks, unfired. The helicopter touched down in a storm of dust and noise. The crew chief was already waving frantically, urging the SEALs to load the wounded. "Move," Oconee shouted. "Get the casualties on board now." The team surged into motion. Rook's stretcher-bearers sprinted toward the helicopter, heads low, boots pounding against the hard ground. Carrick limped after them, supported by another SEAL, his wounded arm pressed tight against his body. Voss stayed in position, covering the retreat. Her rifle was empty now, useless, but she kept it shouldered anyway. Force of habit. The appearance of threat could buy precious seconds. Hadley grabbed her arm. "Time to go, corpsman." She rose and ran. The enemy was still firing, bullets snapping through the air around them, kicking up dirt at their feet. 1 round caught a SEAL named Torres in the shoulder and spun him sideways. Voss saw him stumble, saw him start to fall, and changed direction without thinking. She caught Torres before he hit the ground and hauled him upright. He was heavy, easily 200 pounds of muscle and gear, but adrenaline made her strong. "Keep moving," she shouted in his ear. 30 meters. You can make it." They ran together, her shoulder under his arm, his blood soaking into her uniform. The helicopter's rotors were screaming now, the pilot ready to lift off the moment the last man was aboard. 20 meters. 15. 10. Hadley appeared on Torres's other side, taking half the weight, propelling them forward through sheer will. They reached the helicopter and threw themselves through the open door, landing in a tangle of limbs and equipment and wounded men. "Go, go, go," the crew chief screamed. The helicopter lurched into the air. Voss felt her stomach drop as the ground fell away beneath them. Through the open door, she could see the muzzle flashes of enemy weapons, the tracers reaching up toward them like angry fireflies. Something pinged against the helicopter's hull. Then again. Then they were climbing, banking hard, putting distance between themselves and the valley that had almost become their grave. Voss lay on the deck and stared at the ceiling and tried to remember how to breathe. They had made it. Against all odds, against an ambush that should have killed them all, they had made it out alive. She turned her head and looked at the wounded men around her. Rook was unconscious but stable, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Carrick was pale but alert, his eyes finding hers across the crowded cabin. Torres was cursing steadily, while another SEAL applied pressure to his shoulder wound. 3 critical casualties. For walking wounded. 1 dead. A SEAL named Gutierrez who had taken a round to the neck in the initial ambush and bled out before anyone could reach him. 1 dead. It should have been more. It would have been more, if not for what she had done. Hadley crawled across the deck and settled beside her. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat and someone else's blood. He looked older than he had that morning, like the night had aged him years in a matter of hours. That shot, he said, 900 meters in gusting wind on a moving target. I have seen snipers with 20 years of experience who could not make that shot. Voss closed her eyes. I had a good teacher. Your brother. Yes. Hadley was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer. Almost hesitant. I need to tell you something, he said. About why I treated you the way I did. You do not have to explain. Yes, I do. He exhaled slowly. 4 years ago, I watched my best friend die because a woman froze under fire. She was an intelligence officer, not a fighter, but she was the only one close enough to drag him to cover. She just stood there, would not move, could not move. Danny bled out 5 feet away from her. Voss opened her eyes and looked at him. She saw the pain he had been carrying, the wound that had never healed, the grief that had hardened into hatred. I blamed her, Hadley continued. I blamed every woman I ever served with after that. Told myself they were all liabilities, all weak points waiting to fail. I looked at you and saw her. Saw Danny dying while she stood there doing nothing. I'm not her, Voss said quietly. I know that now. Hadley shook his head. You ran in a fire to save Carrick. You killed a sniper at 800 meters. You made a shot that saved this entire helicopter. You're nothing like her. And I have been treating you like a liability when you are the reason most of us are still alive. The helicopter banked again, and through the window Voss could see the lights of forward operating base Wolverine growing larger in the distance. Safety. Medical care. The end of the longest night of her life. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Hadley said. I'm just telling you I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Voss looked at him for a long moment. This man who had made her life miserable, who had questioned her competence, who had wanted her gone from the moment she arrived. He was broken in ways she understood, carrying wounds that did not show on the outside. She thought about Marcus, about the scope he had given her, about the promise she had finally kept. Apology accepted, she said. Now help me check on the wounded. We are not safe until everyone is in surgery. Hadley nodded and rose to help her. Outside the helicopter, the Afghan mountains fell away into darkness, keeping their secrets and their dead. Inside, Alara Voss moved among the men she had saved, doing the work she had trained for, being exactly who she needed to be. Medic, sniper, survivor, all 3 at once. The helicopter touched down at forward operating base Wolverine just after 0300 hours. Medical teams were already waiting on the landing pad, stretchers ready, surgeons scrubbed and standing by. Word had traveled ahead of them. Everyone on base knew that something extraordinary had happened in the valley. Voss helped unload the wounded, working alongside the medical teams with practiced efficiency. Rook went first, rushed straight to surgery, with 3 medics running beside his stretcher. Carrick followed, protesting that he could walk, finally relenting when the base surgeon threatened to sedate him. Torres was the last of the critical cases, still conscious, still cursing, demanding to know who had dragged him to the helicopter. When someone pointed at Voss, He grabbed her hand and squeezed it hard. "I owe you," he said. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it. I owe you." She squeezed back. "Just survive the surgery. That is all I need." The walking wounded were triaged and treated in the field hospital. Voss moved among them, checking bandages, administering pain medication, doing the work she had trained for. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made her hands feel heavy and slow. Lieutenant Commander Oconee found her as she was finishing with the last of the minor casualties. He looked as tired as she felt, his uniform stiff with dried blood and dust, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "Corpsman Voss," he said, "walk with me." They walked through the quiet base, past the motor pool and the communications tent and the rows of shipping containers that served as barracks. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, the first hints of dawn coloring the mountains pink and gold. "I have been doing this for 15 years, Oconee said. "I have seen things that would break most people. I have lost men I loved like brothers. I thought I'd seen everything this job had to offer." He stopped and turned to face her. "I have never seen anything like what you did tonight." Voss did not know what to say. She had done what needed to be done. That was all. "Chief Hadley told me about the sniper duel," Oconee continued. 840 meters in darkness with a borrowed rifle and a scope you carried for 3 years without ever using it. Then you went back to treating wounded like nothing had happened. Then you made a shot at over 900 meters to save the helicopter." "I was just doing my job," she said. "No." Oconee shook his head. "You were doing everyone's job. Medic and sniper and whatever else we needed you to be. That is not normal. That is not training. That is something else entirely." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. A challenge coin, the kind SEALs gave to people who had earned their respect. He pressed it into her hand. "I am putting you in for the Navy and Marine Corps Medal," he said, "for heroism under fire. It is the highest non-combat decoration we can award. You earned it 10 times over." Voss looked at the coin in her palm. It was heavier than she expected. "Thank you," she said, "but I did not do it for medals." "I know. That is why you deserve one." They stood in silence as the sun crept higher, painting the base in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere behind them, surgeons were fighting to save Rook's leg and Carrick's arm and Torres's shoulder. Somewhere on a ridge in Nangarhar province, bodies were cooling in the morning light. "Get some sleep," Oconee said finally. "That is an order." Voss nodded and turned toward the barracks. She had taken maybe 10 steps when Carrick's voice stopped her. "Corpsman Voss." He was standing in the doorway of the medical building, his arm in a sling, his face pale but determined. A nurse was trying to guide him back inside, but he was not moving. Voss walked toward him. "You should be in bed," she said. "Had to give you something first." He reached into his pocket with his good hand and pulled out a small metal badge. It was a spotter's insignia, the symbol worn by sniper teams to identify trained observers. He held it out to her. "This is not official," he said. "I cannot make you a sniper through proper channels. But as far as I am concerned, you earned this tonight. You are one of us now." Voss took the badge and felt her throat tighten. "One of us." 3 words that meant more than any medal or commendation ever could. "I do not know what to say," she managed. "Do not say anything. Just keep that scope handy." Carrick smiled weakly. "Next deployment, I want you on Overwatch with me. If command approves it. You want me as your spotter? I want you as my partner. Anyone who can shoot like you deserves to be behind a rifle, not just a medical bag." He paused. "Unless you would rather stay a corpsman." Voss thought about Marcus, about the promise she had finally kept, about the gift she had denied for 3 years because using it hurt too much. "I want to be both," she said. "I want to save lives and take them when I have to. I do not want to choose." Carrick nodded. "Then do not choose. Be both. Be whatever this team needs you to be. That is what warriors do." The nurse finally succeeded in pulling him back inside. Voss stood alone in the morning light, holding a challenge coin in one hand and a spotter's badge in the other, feeling like she had finally become the person Marcus always knew she could be. She was still standing there when word came from surgery. Rook was out of the operating room. His leg was saved. He was asking for her. She found him in the recovery ward, groggy from anesthesia, but awake. His face lit up when he saw her. "They told me what you did," he said. "After you patched me up. The sniper. The helicopter. Everything. Voss sat down beside his bed. You should be resting. I will rest when I am dead. Rook reached out and took her hand. They said you had not shot a rifle in 3 years. Not since your brother died. And then you made 2 impossible shots in one night. She nodded. It was time. He would have wanted me to. Rook was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke again, his voice thick with medication and emotion. You're going to make it, she had told him in the middle of the firefight. And when you do, I am going to teach you to shoot. He squeezed her hand. I'm holding you to that, he said. And when I can walk again, you're going to tell me about your brother. Not because you have to, because I want to know the man who taught you to be what you are. Voss felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back. His name was Marcus, she said. And yes, I will tell you about him. Rook smiled and closed his eyes. Within seconds, he was asleep. Voss sat beside him and watched the sun rise over the mountains and let herself feel something she had not felt in 3 years. Hope. Voss slept for 14 hours straight. When she finally woke, the sun was setting again, painting her small quarters in shades of amber and red. For a moment, she did not know where she was or what day it was or why her body ached like she had been beaten with hammers. Then the memories came flooding back. The ambush, the sniper duel, the shot that saved the helicopter. All of it crashing over her like a wave she could not escape. She lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling and let herself feel the weight of what she had done. 3 men dead by her hand. Dozens of lives saved by the same hands. The math did not balance. Not really, but it was the only math that mattered in war. A knock at her door pulled her back to the present. She opened it to find a young SEAL standing in the hallway. She recognized him from the mission, one of the operators who had helped carry Rook to the helicopter. His name was Dominguez, and he looked nervous. Corpsman Voss, he said, the lieutenant commander wants you at the memorial courtyard. The whole platoon is gathering. What for? He would not say, but he said to tell you it is important. Voss pulled on a clean uniform and followed Dominguez through the base. The memorial courtyard was a small space behind the chapel, marked by a simple stone wall engraved with the names of service members who had died at FOB Wolverine over the years. She had walked past it many times but had never stopped to read the names. Tonight, the courtyard was full. Every SEAL from a platoon was there, along with support personnel, medical staff, even the helicopter pilots who had flown them out of the valley. They stood in a loose semicircle around a small wooden platform, their faces solemn in the fading light. Gutierrez's photograph sat on the platform, surrounded by candles. His helmet rested beside it, along with his rifle and boots arranged in the traditional battlefield memorial. Voss felt her throat tighten. She had not known Gutierrez well. He had been quiet, professional, one of those operators who did his job without fanfare and expected nothing in return. Now he was gone, his name about to be added to the stone wall behind them. Lieutenant Commander Oconee stepped forward and addressed the gathering. We are here to honor Petty Officer 2nd Class Miguel Gutierrez, he said. A warrior, a brother, a man who gave his life in service to his country and his teammates. The memorial service was brief but powerful. Several SEALs spoke about Gutierrez, sharing memories and stories that painted a picture of a man Voss wished she had known better. There were no tears, not openly, but she could feel the grief rippling through the crowd like wind through tall grass. When the service ended, Oconee spoke again. Before we dismiss, there is one more matter to address. He turned and looked directly at Voss. Corpsman Voss, please step forward. She walked to the platform on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The eyes of every person in the courtyard followed her. She had never felt so visible in her life. 2 nights ago, Oconee said, this platoon walked into an ambush that should have killed us all. We lost a brother. We almost lost many more. The reason most of us are standing here today is because of the woman in front of you. He gestured, and Hadley stepped forward from the crowd. The chief's face was unreadable, but his voice was steady when he spoke. I owe Corpsman Voss an apology, he said, and I owe all of you the truth. The courtyard went silent. When she arrived at this unit, I treated her like a liability. I questioned her competence. I made her feel unwelcome. I did this because of something that happened to me years ago, something that had nothing to do with her. He paused, and Voss saw the effort it took for him to continue. I was wrong. Corpsman Voss is not a liability. She is the reason I am alive. She is the reason Carrick is alive. She is the reason Rook still has his leg and Torres still has his arm. She ran in a fire to save wounded men. She killed an enemy sniper at 800 meters. She made a shot at 900 meters that saved our helicopter and everyone on it. Hadley turned to face her directly. Every man in this platoon owes you their life, he said. We will never forget what you did. I will never forget. He saluted her. A formal, precise salute, the kind reserved for superior officers and fallen heroes. One by one, every SEAL in the courtyard did the same. Voss stood surrounded by saluting warriors and felt something break open inside her chest. Not grief this time. Something else. Something that felt like belonging. Carrick stepped forward, his arms still in a sling. He was holding something in his good hand. A rifle scope, polished and gleaming in the candlelight. This belonged to your brother, he said. You told me he gave it to you before he died. Told you to keep shooting. Voss nodded, not trusting her voice. You kept that promise, Carrick continued, but you should not have to carry it alone anymore. He pressed the scope into her hands. She looked down and saw that something had been added to the case. A small engraving, fresh and clean, right below her brother's name. Alara Voss. Koskar. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful, Carrick said. To your brother. To your team. To yourself. The tears came then, and she did not try to stop them. After the ceremony, the crowd slowly dispersed. Voss stayed behind, sitting on the stone bench beside Gutierrez's memorial, holding her brother's scope and watching the candles flicker in the darkness. A shadow fell across her. She looked up to find Dominguez standing there, the young SEAL who had come to fetch her. Can I sit? He asked. She nodded. He settled onto the bench beside her and was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I heard you carry that scope because of your brother, he said. A Marine sniper. He died over here. Yes. Dominguez nodded slowly. I had a brother too. Marines. Fallujah. He did not come home either. Voss looked at him and saw her own grief reflected in his eyes. Two people who had lost brothers to the same war, sitting together in the darkness, carrying weights that no one else could see. What was his name? She asked. Antonio. Everyone called him Tony. He paused. What was yours? Marcus. Dominguez was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke again. Does it get easier, carrying them with you? Voss thought about the question. She thought about 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending she could outpace her grief. No, she said finally. It does not get easier, but you get stronger, strong enough to carry them and still keep moving. Dominguez nodded. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. They sat together in the darkness, two survivors, and let the silence say what words could not. 1 month later, Alara Voss stood in a ceremony hall at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado and tried not to cry. The room was full of dress uniforms and polished medals and flags hanging from every wall. Admirals and captains filled the front rows, their faces solemn and attentive. Behind them sat the men she had fought beside in Koskar, the SEALs who had watched her transform from a dismissed corpsman into something none of them had expected. Rook was there, seated in the 3rd row with a cane propped against his knee. His leg had healed well, the surgeons said. He would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, but he would walk. He caught her eye and grinned, and she felt something warm spread through her chest. Carrick sat beside him, his arm out of the sling now, months of physical therapy ahead of him before he could return to full duty. He nodded at her, a small gesture that carried the weight of everything they had shared. Hadley stood at the back of the room, watching with an expression she could not quite read. He had become her fiercest advocate in the weeks since Afghanistan. She had heard him telling her story to anyone who would listen, describing the shots she had made, the lives she had saved, the courage she had shown. The man who had once wanted her gone now seemed determined to make sure no one ever forgot what she had done. The ceremony began with a reading of the citation. Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Alara Voss, United States Navy, is hereby awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism not involving conflict with an enemy. The citation detailed the events of that night in clinical language that could not capture the terror or the triumph. It described the sniper duel, the medical treatment under fire, the final shot that saved the helicopter. It used words like extraordinary and exceptional and above and beyond. Voss listened and remembered the reality behind the words. The blood on her hands, the weight of the rifle, the sound Marcus's scope made when she finally looked through it after 3 years of grief. The Admiral pinned the medal to her chest and shook her hand. Cameras flashed. Applause filled the room. She smiled and said thank you and felt like she was watching it all happen to someone else. Afterward, there was a reception. People she had never met approached to congratulate her, to shake her hand, to tell her how inspiring her story was. She accepted their praise with grace and escaped as soon as she could. She found Rook waiting for her outside, leaning on his cane and squinting in the California sunlight. "Quite a show in there," he said. "I hate ceremonies." "I know. That is why I am rescuing you." He gestured toward the parking lot. "Come on. There is somewhere you need to be." They drove for 2 hours, winding through hills and valleys until they reached a small cemetery overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Voss had been here only once before, 3 years ago, when they lowered Marcus into the ground, and she had sworn she would never touch a rifle again. Rook stayed in the car while she walked among the headstones. She found Marcus's grave easily, the stones still clean and white, the grass around it neatly trimmed. Someone had been maintaining it. She wondered who. She knelt beside the grave and placed her hand on the cold stone. "Hey," she said. "It has been a while." The ocean wind carried her word away, but she kept talking anyway. "I kept your scope. All these years, I kept it with me even though I could not bear to use it. I think part of me knew I would need it someday, that you would need me to need it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the scope, now engraved with her own name beside his. "It saved 9 lives," she said. "Your scope, your teaching, everything you gave me. 9 men came home because of what you taught me on those ranges in Montana." Tears were falling now, but she did not wipe them away. "I'm not running anymore," she continued. "I am not hiding from who I am. You always said I was better than you. I never believed it, but I believe it now. And I'm going to keep believing it every time I look through this glass, every time I take the shot, every time I save someone who might have died without me." She pressed her forehead against the stone and closed her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus, for the scope, for the lessons, for believing in me when I could not believe in myself. I love you. I will always love you, and I will make you proud every single day I have left." She stayed there for a long time, kneeling in the grass, letting the grief and the gratitude wash over her in equal measure. When she finally stood, she felt lighter than she had in years. Rook was waiting by the car, pretending he had not been watching. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." She wiped her eyes and managed a smile. "I am okay." They drove back to Coronado as the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded her of the Afghan mountains at dawn. If this story moved you tonight, I hope you will take a moment to share your thoughts. Tell us about your favorite part, or maybe a character who stayed with you. Or perhaps you know someone who carries a weight like Alara carried, someone who found strength they did not know they had when everything was on the line. Those people are everywhere, in every family, every unit, every community. Sometimes they just need the right moment to show the world who they really are. 3 days after the ceremony, Voss received transfer requests from 3 different SEAL teams. All of them wanted her. All of them had heard what she had done. She chose to stay with Oconee platoon. They were her family now, the men who had seen her at her worst and her best, who had watched her become something none of them expected. She could not imagine serving anywhere else. On her first day back, Carrick met her at the armory. He was holding a rifle case, long and black and clearly well used. "Figured you would need this," he said. "Custom build. Tune it myself. Consider it a welcome back gift." She opened the case and found a precision rifle nestled in foam padding. It was beautiful, all clean lines and perfect balance, a weapon built for someone who understood what it meant to take a shot that mattered. There was an engraving on the stock. A single word. Ghost. The SEALs had given her a call sign. They did that for people who earned their respect, people they considered part of the Brotherhood, regardless of rank or rating or gender. Ghost, she said, testing the word. Because you move like one, Carrick explained. Shoot like one. And when the enemy tries to find you, you have already saved your people and disappeared. She ran her fingers over the engraving and felt Marcus smiling somewhere beyond the veil. That night, she sat alone in her quarters and cleaned the rifle by lamplight. The scope mounted on top was her brother's, the glass he had given her, now carrying both their names into whatever battles lay ahead. She had spent 3 years running from who she was. 3 years pretending that she could escape her gift by burying it. 3 years telling herself that being a medic was enough. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. She was meant to be both healer and warrior, the person who saved lives with bandages and bullets in equal measure. She switched from medic to sniper in seconds, and the SEALs said they would never forget. Neither would she.